She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
All right, we're taking a little different approach to sobriety with this episode. Jane, you kind of walked the path, and you're going to introduce some new terms to us because I think we all know the AA paradigm of sobriety, being powerless over alcohol. But there's this new kind of, I think it's new, not probably to you, sober curious movement. Kind of explain that to me.
Yeah, so I think with sober curious, it's not about having to label something or define something. I love AA. It's been around for 88 years. I think it's been a gift to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is this dichotomy of either you're in this one category that is a normal drinker, or you're in this other category where you're powerless over alcohol. You've hit a rock bottom and decided to abstain from alcohol and change your life moving forward. And the problem is most of us fall somewhere in the middle of someone who has 2 drinks a year or doesn't drink at all, or somebody who has hit rock bottom and is working a recovery program in AA. Most of us, we all live in this post, lockdown world where many people started drinking with their neighbors, having cocktails in their yard while the kids played, did whatever they had to do to survive. And it's kind of like all the rules went out the window. And now we're kind of emerging from that with a culture that drinks everywhere. You drink at play dates, you drink at the park, you drink at your kids' sporting events, you drink at dinner, you drink at parties, you drink at Bible study, book club.
Right. Right.
Yes. And so I think that it's become this thing where you kind of, if you don't drink, you have to explain why you don't drink. It's the only chemical, the only substance, the only mind-altering chemical that you have to explain to somebody why you don't use it. If I said, oh, well, I quit using cocaine, nobody's going to say, well, why?
Well, why? Right.
Are you ever going to do cocaine again? Well, I had no idea it was that bad. Like, what happened?
Right.
And so I think Sober Curious is just starting a dialogue about a different way of living and a different way of looking at alcohol. And just, it doesn't have to mean you don't ever drink again or you give up alcohol completely, but it's more about arming yourself with information and making informed choices about when you do drink and you don't drink. And it's not just this unspoken given that everyone's going to drink at the party unless they're an alcoholic.
So it's not all or nothing.
It does not have to be all or nothing. Absolutely not. For me, I chose to give up alcohol completely, but I certainly don't think that's what everyone should do if they don't feel led to do that. I think it's about just let's be real with this. Let's not buy into an illusion. Let's examine it and then decide how we as individuals want to proceed and what kinds of choices lead us on a path that really aligns with our values and our purpose in being here.
Therefore, in the, let's say, the party crowd, let's say you're going to the Christmas party and the tray of cocktails are passed. In the sobriety world, you would pass and say, no, thank you, I'm sober. And then everybody knows, they know you've been to a meeting, they know you have a sponsor, right?
Yes,
but
everyone knows they have a file in their brain for that.
Yes, right. So sober curious, people are going, wait, is Jane on a wagon or is she off a wagon?
Yes.
And why did she do this?
Yes.
So because you get asked that then. My point is we don't follow up with somebody who's sober unless we might say, oh, congratulations. How long have you been sober? We congratulate them. But sober curious, people all of a sudden feel condemned because they're like, well, maybe I should or shouldn't. How do you handle that pressure?
That's an excellent point, because I think when somebody says, oh, I'm sober,
you write it off.
People think, oh, you're different than me. I don't fit into that category.
Right.
I don't have a problem with alcohol.
Right.
And if you're just choosing not to drink, then people are like, oh, well, what is she thinking about me? Or what about what I'm doing?
People feel judged immediately.
People feel judged. Yes.
Even the small chatter I have on my podcast just saying, I've eliminated 95. I mean, and people listening will go, I haven't seen you have a drink in a long time, but I might have, if I was at something and there was champagne, I might have clinked the glass and had a sip, right? But
Yeah.
it's funny how people now identify me. I was working at the gym and the girl came up, she goes, "You don't drink anymore, do you?" And I go, "Well, no, but I don't not drink either. I
Yes.
just
Like,
haven't, my mind is selfish. It interrupts my sleep and
yeah.
it doesn't work for me anymore. It gives me a headache. I get congested. I mean, it's old
Yes.
people problems for sure. You metabolize alcohol
Well,
differently when you age. But do
yes,
you see my
absolutely.
point? Is all of a
Yes.
sudden they group me as to, oh, you're one of them.
You're one of those people
I'm
who's
like,
different than
who
us.
am I? Right. That's it.
Yes.
You're
I mean,
different.
for me, when I first stopped drinking, I had this kind of like epiphany moment. I wasn't planning to quit drinking. The day before I quit drinking, it was not even a thing in my mind that I was going to quit drinking. I had an epiphany. I gave up alcohol. And I didn't say anything to anyone for a while. And, people really don't notice. Like,
Right.
I think that week I went
Right.
to like a neighborhood happy hour and I had a Topo Chico and lime. And no one's like, oh, why aren't you drinking or what's going on? They just don't notice. Or you bring like your little tumbler cup and nobody knows what's in it. And so it wasn't until I started being more open about it that people started kind of noticing and asking questions and wanting to know what that's about, because it does seem like such a radical thing to do.
And it's not. It's really how I, before pandemic, BP, it's how a lot of people don't. Well, no, let me back up. Before the sponsored science said we needed to have a glass of red wine every night,
Yes.
there was a time where people, I remember, just didn't drink, or they might have had a margarita with a Mexican food. I mean,
Yeah,
but
like
it wasn't
once in a blue moon or
it
something.
wasn't wine o'clock every day.
Right. It was not a part of their regular rhythm in
No,
life.
or maybe I was just in a group of people that didn't consume alcohol every day and didn't really think about it. You might have a bottle of wine or something that you go, oh yeah, I'll get that
Yeah, I'll
open.
pull this out and
Yeah. And then maybe it's because my world and all my people went through menopause and we all thought, well, we need alcohol to help us get through the day. And really,
yes.
I've said this before on my podcast, people going through perimenopause, it doesn't help. It doesn't help with the heart palpitations. It
No,
it
the
really
night
creates,
sweats.
yeah, it creates anxiety and some other things, but you don't know that because and I understand that's why there's no judgment for me. You want relief. So
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. I
as
wanted relief,
that's right.
and the thing is, once I realized that the short-term relief was not worth the actually greater long-term suffering, that it clicked for me. Like, yes, maybe right this second, I'm going to feel good for about 30 minutes after I have this glass of wine, but then I'm not going to sleep that well. And if I
I
have a
know.
second or a third glass, I
Oh,
might regret what I
yeah.
said. I might not fully remember everything I said. And then it's like, well, now I'm really feeling anxious when I'm like waking up in the morning and reviewing all of these factors and
Tapes.
then
Yeah.
trying to tackle my day.
Thinking. Yeah. And thinking too. What did I say yesterday? I regret what I say when I'm sober, and I forget
Yeah.
what I say when I'm sober. So alcohol really isn't a good addition to my life anymore. So people then ask you, Jane, what was the impetus for this? What's your answer? For the people who are sober curious that want to try it, how do they navigate the party?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'll just kind of start and give you a little bit of a background. I'll tell you my story with alcohol.
But wait a minute. Is that am I prying by asking? Am I doing the very thing that might offend you?
No,
Okay.
I think that talking about things and being open is so freeing, and it alleviates that sense of shame. When we hold things in and we guard this information, not that we need to go out and tell everyone everything, but it just reinforces to our brain that this is shameful information. And
Well,
really, I think that,
secrets are shameful. I mean,
yeah, secrets are shameful.
yeah, we categorize them as shame and then we don't share them. And secrets that you have, a lot of people have the same. It's just an
They
issue,
have the
and a lot of
same
people have them.
ones. Yes, we all have something that is difficult. And I think if we can be open and share our stories, we have the ability to create connections with others that never even occurred to us. So no, I'm happy to
Okay.
share if you would like to,
Yeah,
if you'd like to
no,
hear.
I'm nosy. So yes, Mrs.
You're like,
Kravis
yeah,
wants to
bring it
know
on.
all the details. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, so I grew up in a small town in North Texas, child of the 80s and 90s. And so, my first experience with alcohol was pretty early, young teenage years. That's kind of what we did for fun in high school. We would drive out to someone's land and we would get our fake IDs and get some beer, or somebody's older cousin would buy us some beer, and we would drink and smoke cigarettes and have a good time. And then,
That seems like the worst time to me now, but I know then I thought it was fun.
Sounds so painful. But that's what we did. So it kind of started with that, like teenage partying. And then went off to college, went to Texas A&M, kind of continued that trend. And I would say my drinking looked pretty similar to other people in my friend group. But I will say something that I experienced that I don't think every drinker experiences, but I do think that it's relatively common, or more common than we talk about, is blacking out. And so a blackout is not passing out. It's not going to sleep without meaning to. It is
that's what I always thought
and talking.
it was.
Yes. It's walking,
so
talking,
you're totally
moving.
lucid during a blackout.
You are totally lucid during a blackout.
Had no idea.
But you don't recall any of it, or sometimes people recall bits and pieces, and so that sometimes we refer to that as a brownout. And so I can remember experiencing that, as a teenager and then in college, and it's just like the most horrifying feeling to wake up and not remember how you got home.
Yeah. And
or
wonder.
worse, wake up not at home and not know where your keys or your purse or your phone is, or, it's awful. And I think that is relatively common among, college age and, people who party, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So I experienced that and off and on, and that was, to me, that's a red flag. If that's happening like that, the consequences just aren't worth the benefit. But I will say that I really enjoyed alcohol for a long time. I love margaritas. I love red wine.
Yeah.
Some of my best memories involved alcohol. So I don't want to say it's evil and I hate it, or anyone who does it is wrong. Like, I don't believe that at all.
That's a good point. Because that, I think, also is part of a sobriety movement of, that's it. And maybe is they do associate every time with their drinking that the outcome was very negative. But I'm with you. I actually like red wine and margaritas. I really kind of miss them, but I just can't metabolize them anymore. So I'm doing some other, they're the fake hooches you can buy. That I'm trying.
The adaptogens
right. So I think that's really neat, not nice for you to say. It's okay you have permission to say, I enjoyed going to the winery and tasting the wines with people, or traveling someplace, or having a different type of margarita. I think that's okay.
Yeah. Or going to a really nice restaurant and having one of their specialty cocktails and then looking at the wine list. Like, I really enjoyed that. That was a part of my life for a long time. And I can't say that I regret all of it. I think that alcohol maybe served some purpose for me. Another piece of my story is that I struggled with shyness and social anxiety pretty much as long as I can remember.
And so you thought that helped you, or maybe it did help you kind of come out of that shell.
In the short term, it did. It's like you have a drink or two and you don't care if people are perceiving you in a judgmental or critical way. You're able to let go and let loose.
Did your friends notice that drinking Jane was more open than non-drinking Jane?
I think they did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a friend several years ago who, we were laughing about like a dinner where I'd had too much to drink. And she was like, yeah, I love drunk Jane. And I'm like,
Right.
oh gosh.
How did you feel about that?
It kind of like hit me. I know she didn't mean it to be, she did
No,
not mean it in a negative
no,
or
she
hurtful
didn't.
way,
No.
but it made me feel ashamed. And
Yeah.
then it made me think, what about sober Jane? You know?
Well, and didn't it make you think? Because the thing with drinkers is, I wasn't drunk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you probably questioned her in your mind thinking, well, I wasn't drunk. But
Yeah.
drinkers don't realize, yes, you were.
Yes.
Yes, you are, or you were or are at that time. It's the people around you who can be more objective about
Yes.
how much you've really consumed, because we're not
Right.
honest with ourselves.
Right.
I mean,
The part of our brain, the prefrontal
that,
cortex,
yeah,
is where we reason and use logic and problem solve. And the more alcohol we consume, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. The more we consume, the more that prefrontal cortex goes offline. And our ability to have insight into our own behavior and decision making becomes impaired, and our judgment becomes impaired.
that's why
Hence,
you shouldn't drive. That's
that's why
why,
you shouldn't drive. That's
I
why you
mean,
shouldn't decide whether or not you want to like make out with someone or,
right.
like they
Yeah.
find that women who black out tend to become victims of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
men who
for
black
sure.
out tend to become violent. And so it's like very interesting that, you think of like the aggressive man getting into a bar fight. That's kind of what happens when men are blacked out, and women, no longer are able to
Say no.
say no or even remember their values and make decisions that align
Right.
with their sober self.
Okay, so let's go back to that. The whole blackout thing, you've totally ripped the rug out from under me, because I remember just having a cocktail or two, and I'm telling you, and I say, I can't remember things sober, but I really couldn't the next day.
Yeah.
And this was in the last 5 or 10 years, that if we were in an event and I had 2 glasses of wine, I'd go, did I really couldn't recount what I'd said the day before. So
Yes.
is that more of a brownout?
That would probably be more of a brownout. What's happening basically is the hippocampus is a part of the brain that stores memory. And when our, alcohol level, our BAL, gets to a certain level, which is different for everyone, there's no like official, oh, you get to this BAL and you black out. It's different for everyone. When it gets to a certain threshold, your ability to take short-term memories and put them into long-term memory starts declining and becoming impaired. And so you'll notice this with somebody who you're having a conversation with someone, they seem maybe like they're a little bit intoxicated. If they are asking you the same questions, like you have a conversation, you talk about something, and then a few minutes later, they're like, now, what did you say that is? Or they may not even know that they'd talked about it. They might ask you the same question and kind of have the same conversation over and over again. And it's because they can keep that information in their brain for a couple of minutes, but it's not going into long-term memory. And so it's lost, and they wake up the next morning and it's gone.
Oh, okay, that is actually blowing my mind, because I'm telling you that I have experienced, full disclosure, I mean, I have no secrets.
Yeah.
I've experienced that, and I have the genetics, even though I come from a long line of addicts and alcoholics. I can't handle alcohol. I'm a slow metabolizer. I do have the genes that show that I can't take
Maybe
drugs.
you're predisposed
to anything.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, if I did that, it was 2 glasses of wine. I don't overdo it.
Yeah. You're
But
not like a 2-bottle of wine blacking
No.
out person. You're like,
no,
a couple
no.
glasses and your memory starts
And
suffering.
totally. So that, now that I think about it, that's probably another reason why I don't like going down that path. I don't, but I'm just now putting it together now. It's the connection
Yes.
of, I don't have good memories or memorable events, pleasant memories from that event, because I'm going, because I do, I'm not that I'm inappropriate, but I, put my foot in my mouth a lot. And, I've
Yes.
spent I've made a living saying the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But to see that it can happen so quickly is such a wake up call to me.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's actually, it can be terrifying for people. Yeah, it's scary.
So really after it, to somebody, it could be 2 drinks. That
It really could be.
that sends you over
That
the
sends you
edge.
over. There are certain factors that can make you more prone to having a blackout, like drinking quickly or drinking on an empty stomach, kind of the things that we know that lead
Yeah.
to intoxication faster. And it can vary for that person, from week to week based on sleep and their health and what they've eaten and that sort
Probably
of thing.
cycles too for women
Probably,
who are cycling.
yeah, based on where you are hormonally in your cycle, and yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
okay, let's define then drunk,
Mm-hmm.
inebriated. And
Yeah,
because that's where people say, well, I don't get drunk. I drink, but I don't get drunk. But it doesn't matter now. Now you can brown out or black out before your brain recognizes. Well, that's why
that
people take the keys and get in a car. They think I'm fine.
they think I'm fine. Like, so there's this debate around like, well, why would someone need to quit drinking? Why don't you just moderate? Why don't you just stop at 1? And the thing is that my brain that has no alcohol involved in it, it can decide, okay, I'm going to have 1 drink tonight. Well, then I have that 1 drink, and that's a different brain that's deciding whether or not to have a second drink, and maybe a third, and then maybe someone orders around, and then I have that one. And
Got
then
it.
before you know it, you wake up the next morning, I'm like, why did I do that? I was only going to have 1 drink, and now I feel horrible. I have Hangxiety, another new term that I actually love.
Okay, wait. What, spell that word then with an H?
Like anxiety, but it's Hangxiety. It's like the
Hangover.
emotional hangover from
Yes,
alcohol.
that's good.
Yeah. And so I've had clients who have given up alcohol just because they it's not good for their anxiety. They quit drinking and they realize, oh my gosh, I don't need to take Prozac or Zoloft. Like, I just eliminate alcohol, and that's half the battle.
And we reach for alcohol. Like I said, when I was perimenopausal, I reached for alcohol because of the heart palpitations, and
Yes.
it didn't help them. They did not slow down. I needed a pellet in my butt, which I have now. In
Yeah,
fact,
that you needed a hormonal fix.
I had to manipulate my hormones, but I was
Yes.
thinking I had to manipulate my environment.
Yes. And, being hungover is really just a form of withdrawal. And part of the physiological response to alcohol withdrawal is increased heart rate. If somebody went in for
Oh,
alcohol detox, they would be monitoring their vitals every 15 minutes for increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, all those things. And so really it's kind of like a mini withdrawal symptom the next day. Your heart's racing, you don't feel good, maybe like night sweats, not sleeping well.
well, gosh, there's a lot of things we can go down. So in the blood alcohol world, that you were talking about, the blood alcohol level, I know before in Arkansas, I think to drive a car, it might be at 0.8. Now I'm not good at math. So
I think it's 0.08 in Texas,
0.08.
probably
Yeah,
same.
not 0.8, obviously. So 0.08. Do those people, how much alcohol is that to get, if I got to 150-pound woman got to 0.08?
That's a good question, and it's hard because there's individual variability, and it depends on what you've eaten that day as well.
Food, yeah, food would probably have a lot to do with that.
But in general, I would say probably if you have more than 1 drink in like an hour to an hour and a half period, your blood alcohol is going to be over that.
Okay, so it's quickly. You get there quickly.
You could probably, let's say you went to like a 3-hour dinner and you had 2 glasses of wine with a big meal. Maybe you would be under 0.08, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, the reason I'm going to back you up on that, one time, friends and I were cooking for something, and the girl's husband is a DEA agent. And so we were having red wine. In fact, we were auditioning for a cooking show. We got it, but it's a long story, but we didn't do it. But so we had red wine, and I was teaching them how to fry chicken. And I had like 2 glasses of wine, and we have a rule in our house that, there's no drinking and driving. So the DEA agent had a breathometer or something. I can't remember. Maybe it was a breathometer. We did something.
A breathalyzer.
Yeah, breathalyzer. And it was funny that, but we had eaten heavy, high fat foods, and I didn't register And because he was like, I'm not going to let you get the keys of the car and leave my house because he's a federal agent. I mean,
Yeah.
of course. And he was surprised. And he said, wow, because we may have had 2.5 glasses, but we were there for hours. It was maybe a 3 or 4 hour period. But he said that shows you that food does blunt the effect, and probably high fat foods. But think
Yes.
about, a lot of people go to events or go to the bar and sit there and nibble on a few things, and they haven't eaten much.
Yeah. Or
So the
women
one
will be like,
glass,
well, I'm watching my calories, so I'm not going to eat dinner because I know I'm going to be drinking later. And
yeah,
then, it's not
I
good.
see that all the time with women who are obsessed with their weight. See, I'm not obsessed with my weight because I'm an intermittent faster. I fast, and
Yeah.
that's my
That gives you
life.
some
And
freedom.
yeah, there's just so much freedom.
Yeah. Basically, if you have food in your stomach, it will slow the absorption. It will not prevent intoxication, but it will slow the absorption. So,
Gosh, to be drunk and full would be a terrible. Now, those are
yes,
senses that I don't ever want to experience
don't
again.
crave.
I don't I mean, I try not typically don't overeat.
Yeah.
Then, so tell me your age, at Texas A&M, 18 to 22. You
Mm-hmm.
probably had to get your master's. So you
I
spent,
did. So I after A&M, I took a year off and worked, and then I went and got my master's in social work at the University of Texas at Austin. Had a great time partying there.
and that's a big party city.
Big party city.
Well,
There are
I
lots
know
of fun things to do.
all college towns are, but I mean, Austin really is. It's a New
Yes,
Orleans of kind of the West.
it is for
Food is
sure.
good.
Good
People
live
go for the
music.
alcohol. They walk, live music. They walk the streets, all that.
Yes.
So the culture is so inviting. My son went to LSU. The
Yes,
Louisiana
same.
culture is so inviting about drinking and eating, and
Well,
they're
and
very hospitable.
it makes you feel like if I don't do this,
I'm
then
rude.
what am I going to do? Who's going
Right.
to want to hang out with me? Am I
Right.
just going to be like
No
this
No one's going to want to
nerdy
sit with
kid
me.
over here by myself? And like, I don't think I would have considered not drinking back in those days. I was 22, 3, 4.
There was no
and then
dialogue, though, Jane. There was no dialogue for that at the time.
There really wasn't. And then after graduate school, I spent about a year traveling. I went to Australia for the last semester of my graduate program and did an internship in South Australia in a city called Adelaide. And then I went to London for 6 months because they were recruiting social workers at that time, and you could get a 6-month work visa. And so, I think that my drinking was probably pretty bad in London.
Another culture. I mean, the bars of Dublin to the
pubs
drinking in
and the
London,
pints
pubs and everything. Yes.
Yes. And, it's hard moving to another country, and I didn't know a single soul. And then I met a few people. But I think I ended up getting a little bit depressed just with the dreary weather and the isolation.
I was going to say, the lack of sunlight. Oh,
yes. And so then, I drank to kind of get me through those times. And I think it probably just made things worse. And so I guess long story short, I survived all those years, came to Dallas shortly after that. Probably 15 years ago, I moved to Dallas, met my husband a few years after that. And really the last decade of my life, I've been having babies and raising kids and, working on my career. And so it hasn't really been conducive to drinking the way I used to, but I would say I probably did still drink regularly. I lost my mom to cancer. And so cancer's always been on my radar. And so in my mind, I was always like, well, if you drink more than 7 drinks a week for women, then you're more likely to get cancer. And so I would try to, in whatever days it was, I would try to have no more than 7 drinks a week.
Threshold.
Which sounds like a lot, but that goes quick. And then if there was something going on, sometimes I would, if I had a couple of events that week or something, maybe I would have more than that. And then I would say so I quit drinking a year ago today. So September of 2022.
Okay.
And I would say the year before that, I was going out more. My sister was here. She had moved back to Dallas from Seattle, and we just were, things were opening back up. We were more social. And so I did have a couple of experiences where I drank more than I intended and I blacked out. And then I was horribly hungover the next day, and, and really couldn't be there for my kids that day. And that was just so much shame, such a horrible feeling. And so much cognitive dissonance, like here I am, a therapist working with my clients during the week, and then I'm so hungover I can't get out of bed on a Saturday. It just didn't, it was incongruent, and it was so uncomfortable. And then another thing that happened is, so every Friday, my husband and my 3 kids, we would go have Mexican food. That was just kind of our tradition at a neighborhood restaurant. We would have a margarita, and then my husband and I would split a second one. And then it kind of got to where we would just have 2 margaritas. And one night after dinner, I was putting my daughter to bed, and she goes, "Mom, you smell like wine." And she's like 6 years old at the time, just innocently, "Mommy, you smell like wine." And I'm sitting there thinking, it's not wine, it's tequila, get it straight. But
if you're going to point a finger, make sure you point a finger at the right spirit.
Get it right. These were margaritas.
Yeah.
But that just struck me as like, I don't want her to just think, oh, this is what mom smells like, or this is what moms do, and this is what I'm going to do. And so that hit home. And then also I'd been working with my own therapist for a couple of years, just really looking at spiritual growth, kind of deconstructing and reconstructing how I practice my religion and my faith. And looking at the big picture of like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And so I'd really been going through kind of this growing phase in all aspects of my life. And the alcohol piece it was almost like I was bumping up against the glass ceiling. Like I couldn't get any further in this like growth journey with alcohol there. And my therapist even said at one point, probably not long before I quit drinking, he's like, "Well, what do you think about just not drinking for 30 days or 90 days?" And I was like, no way. I don't want to do that. I was like, I like my wine and my margaritas too much. I don't want to give up alcohol completely. There's got to be another way. And that was the end of that. So it really wasn't on my radar to quit drinking. And then I had this epiphany one morning. And it's so hard to explain these things in words because it's one of those ineffable things that just doesn't, words just can't really describe it very well. But it was a Monday morning, the day before we had taken my son and like 15 of his friends to play paintball for his birthday. And, it was rowdy and it was loud and chaotic. And I remember afterwards, my nerves were just shot. And I was like, I need a glass of wine. And so I had like a glass and a half of wine, went to bed, woke up the next morning. I was not hungover. I was not steeped in guilt and shame, but I woke up and there was clarity that is hard to describe, that this is just the end of my drinking. Like I've gotten whatever benefit I'm going to get from drinking, I've gotten. And now the cost is higher than the benefit. And I'm done. Like the attachment to it was just kind of gone. And so I haven't drank since that day. That was, a year ago. That was last September 26th. So it was unexpected and unplanned, but it was just such a striking, unusual experience that I knew I was being called to do something differently with my life. And that if I was really going to live into the purpose that God put me here for, I needed to see what would happen if I eliminated alcohol. What could be possible? What potential was I missing out on because I was attached to drinking?
What have you seen in 365 days of the new and improved Jane 2.0?
Yeah, it's been so much easier than I ever imagined. Every now and then I'll miss it, but that lasts for a second or two. The relationships that I've built since that time have been unexpected and just like a deeper, more authentic connection with people. So after I gave up alcohol, I started listening to different podcasts, and I learned about the Sober Curious movement. I didn't know anything about it. And I found a woman that she had a podcast about kind of sober moms and how.
And who is she? Do you remember?
Her name is Suzanne. Oh gosh, it's the Sober Mom Life.
Okay, Sober Mom Life. Okay, we
The
can look
Sober
that
Mom
up and
Life.
we can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, she's awesome. And she talks about how like we drink because motherhood is hard, but actually drinking makes motherhood harder.
Ooh,
So I
that's
was following
profound.
her. It's profound. It is
Mhm.
so profound. And she had a guest on her podcast one day, a woman in Boston who got sober a couple of years ago. And this woman was leading a retreat in Bali. And I thought, ooh, I would love to go on that retreat. And then I thought, no, I mean, how am I going to leave my 3 kids? You know,
Yeah.
at the time I had a 9, 6, and 4-year-old. I can't leave my kids and go across the world and do that to my husband and leave my job and spend all that money. So I put it out of my mind, and then I saw another post about it, and I was like, what if I did? Like, what could be possible if I did say yes and figure out a way to make it happen? You know, like, you know, we kind of limit ourselves, like, oh, well, that's what other people do, or I can't do that, or that would be, people would ask too many questions and it would be embarrassing, or, you know, stuff like that. But I'm like, no, what if I really did? So I mentioned it to my husband, and, you know, at first he was kind of skeptical. He's like, I don't know. And then the next morning he was like, you know, if you really want to go, if you think this is important to you, just go, you know, we'll make it work. And so I went, and it was just such a healing experience. There were 12 women. We were from, I was the only one from Texas. We were from all over the United States. And we did yoga and we did mindfulness practices. And then we did all these kind of amazing Balinese cultural experiences. And I think there is something about being out of your environment, your own culture, like feeling like you're just on this different planet. It's so different. You know, you're stripped of this construct that you carry around with you. And I think that is just such fertile ground for healing and self-exploration. You can really look at yourself and imagine change and realize that there are other possibilities and there are other ways of living life. So it led me to that retreat. And then I loved it so much that I thought the only way I'm going to get back here is if I lead a retreat myself. So I met this woman named Marie who runs this company, and she organizes the whole retreat experience. And then she has people who come lead these retreats from all over the world. And I was like, well, you know, I'm a therapist. I have a therapy practice. I can do this. And so that's kind of where it's led me right now, is I am kind of expanding my role as a therapist to try to reach a broader audience, try to reach people outside of Texas, and try to bring a group of women to Bali to have an experience similar to mine, whether they're sober or they're curious about being sober and, you know, wanting to do personal growth and development and healing. So it's just, I think that the people and the relationships and the opportunities that have opened up have been completely unexpected, and just such a gift.
When you put down that 1.5 glasses of wine that didn't really impede, it was an impediment for you that night, but it was the final nail kind of in the coffin. Did you do like an alcoholic and then throw away all the wine in the house? Or did you just think, it's not even a temptation, I just don't want to imbibe?
I mean, I've got alcohol in my house right now. Like, my husband will have a drink. We have friends come over and have drinks. You know, we've had my sister and brother-in-law actually live in Sydney, Australia, but they've been with us for the last week, and there's beer in the fridge. And if I do have a craving, it's never something that I'm like, well, I just won't drink today and I'll figure it out another time. And by the end of that day, I'm fine, you know? And I was talking to a friend, and she's like, yeah, but I think about, like, what about, you know, when I go to Italy and I want to have wine and I want to sit out on the terrace on the cafes and sip wine. And I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, do you have a trip to Italy planned? And she's like, well, no.
But what if?
She's like, but what if? And I'm like, well, then maybe you can have a drink then. Like, you get to decide. Like, I don't have a trip to Italy planned right now, but, you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to drink again. Maybe I will, you know, who knows? But I know that right now this is working for me, and I'm curious about what path it's going to take me down, and I want to see what happens. And I feel so good. It's hard to think about bringing that back into my life. But if I get to Italy and I really want that glass of wine, well, I'll have it. Like, that's the beauty of being sober curious. I don't have to say I'm never going to drink again. I'm an alcoholic. If I drink, it's a relapse and I have to restart the clock. Like, I'm not counting days. I'm not marking each day off the calendar. Like, I am grateful for this present moment and each day that I have. And I don't really know what's going to happen in the future. I just know I'm trying to do the next right thing and make the next decision that moves me towards my values, not away from them.
In Bali with that group of women, then at night everyone had a bottle of Topo Chico with salt around the rim.
Yeah,
and
or
clinked your glasses.
We went and got massages, or we would take an excursion and go look at waterfalls and go hiking, or we went to the monkey forest, or, we went to a fresh juice bar. The interesting thing about Balinese culture is alcohol is not as big of a thing there. I don't know. I'm not really sure why. I need to look into that. That would be interesting, but it's not ubiquitous like it is here in the United States or in Western culture.
We're so celebratory. I'm thinking in not just Western culture, in 21st century culture, that
Yes.
if you have a good day and you accomplish something with your peers in a group of 12 women who traveled around the globe to get there, we would say now, oh, let's celebrate with a glass of wine.
Let's have a drink. Yes.
Right. So it's changing the narrative in our brain of let's sleep in or take a nap or something else that is indulgent. It's not indulgent.
And
it's just life.
Yes. It's like, if you need to drink to have fun, whatever you're doing or who you're with maybe just isn't fun. It's like, let's create the life
That's good.
that we really want to be living. Let's say no to the things we don't want to do, instead of begrudgingly saying yes and then having to drink to get through it because it's mind numbing or you're anxious or you don't feel like you fit in. I think as women, we carry an invisible load to manage our families and responsibilities, and we don't feel like we can really take time to do what we want to do, but we can pour a drink and sip that while we make dinner or whatever. And that feels like one way to get relief. And so it makes total sense. I've done it so many times myself. But if we can kind of radically look at, like, you know what, I've got one life here. Why not just figure out what it is that I really want to be doing with it and create the life that is meaningful and satisfying to me, that doesn't require alcohol to tolerate it.
The sober curious movement is almost like it's approaching the group of people who are ambiguous in their drinking. They don't drink too much, they don't drink too little. But what about the person with full on alcoholism? And of course, sometimes you do need a medical detox. So you might have to talk to a healthcare provider. But whether at that point, do they still call it a sober curious approach?
I think it's up to them. I think there are people who meet criteria for alcohol use disorder who prefer more of the sober curious approach than they do the AA approach. And I think I think it's about people finding what works for them.
I get it.
I think that detox, like withdrawing from alcohol, can be fatal. And so if the person is drinking regularly and experiencing withdrawal symptoms, definitely want to have a medical detox, see a physician, consider inpatient treatment to get detoxed, and that takes maybe 3 to 5 days, and then figure out what path is best for you.
I worked with a coworker once who tried to quit drinking because we were in a public environment of being on the radio, and Plum had a seizure. That was a day and a half with no alcohol, and the DTs were so serious, and he was put in hospital. You do jeopardize your life. It is a very serious physical, not just physiological. It's a very serious physical condition. And so I
Yes.
do not want to look at that lightly for people,
No.
because somebody
No.
listening could be in that group, and you do need to have,
Yes. If you drink daily,
yeah,
a medical detox is the safest and the least way of suffering, the most humane, compassionate
it
way.
is. It is, for
Like
sure.
nobody needs to suffer or deserves to suffer like that.
Yeah, it is for sure. You know, you were mentioning earlier about women, or you were talking about people in cancer. Actually, Jane, and you may not have seen the science, but there's even new science that women, especially because I do take bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, it is because of the different pathways we now know. So you have estrogen, you have estradiol, estrone. And the estrone pathway is how I believe it said the alcohol is metabolized, and that is the one that causes the cancer. Women
Yes.
who drink and take even bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, not a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
drinking is really, it should have the skull and crossbones on, the margarita glass that they give you, not just the
Yes.
bottle of tequila.
Yes.
I mean, we should look at it really the same way we look at cigarettes,
Right.
too much radiation, things that we know are obvious risks for cancer. Alcohol is one of
Yes.
them.
This
No
is the
one's
most
saying that.
baffling thing to me is why aren't we talking about this?
Yeah, no one. That's
So
what I'm saying. No one's
alcohol
talking about
is
that.
a classified 1 carcinogen.
Yeah.
Same as tobacco, radiation, asbestos.
Right.
As little as 7 to 10 drinks per week increases the risk of breast cancer by 15% because it increases the amount of estrogen in your body.
That's it. And that must be the estrone pathway.
Yes.
That is how it is metabolized. And that is, I know in just doing hormone testing with women, that's the one you don't want.
Right. And so we're not talking about women who have alcohol use disorder. We're talking about low to moderate consumption of alcohol.
Daily drinkers.
Increases your risk of alcohol, or even weekend drinkers who have, let's say they have, a drink on Thursday night, and then they have 2 drinks on Friday, and then they have 3 drinks on Saturday. Whatever combination, it increases your risk of breast cancer. And to me, that's just terrifying that we're not talking about that as a culture and as a society. And that's, that's part of my mission is I want to increase the dialogue around that and, empower women to make choices, informed choices about their health and their well-being.
This is an eye-opening episode. I think so many people can identify with every word you uttered. We'll put the link or any information in the show notes about your next trip, your next Sober Curious trip, and any information on how to reach out to you, because I guess because of state lines, can you see people in other states?
So I could not provide therapy to people in other states, but I could do some coaching and consultation. It just would not be, it wouldn't be mental health treatment, but it could be more coaching. It's not treating a diagnosis, but more helping people with setting goals and coming up with a path that works for them. And then, of course, the Bali retreat is open to women anywhere in the world. And then I have a group on Facebook, a free group called Sobriety Simplified. And it's just a place for women to join, and, they can post anonymously if they want to. They can share their story. They can ask questions. They can support each other. So yeah, like my mission is just to reach more women who might have a similar experience with alcohol as I've had, and just support them along the way.
I love your message. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks you.
Thanks for doing this interview today. Great job.
Yes, it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.